Hi, I am really excited to be sharing a new topic. Today I want to talk a little bit about understanding bullying and aggression. This has been a curiosity of mine for a really long time. As a teacher in a public education school in Ontario, I remember the first week that I was hired, I encountered my first adult experience from a parent whose child was being bullied. And I remembered, first of all, recognizing, oh, yeah, this is totally something I remember from my own childhood, mean girl kind of behavior. And yet I also recognized as a new teacher, I felt really helpless. And, even years later, encountering bullying after I had been teaching for a little while, I still felt like, wow, we really haven't figured out what this bullying is and how to address it. And it stayed with me that, the tactics that we were using didn't seem very effective. So this has been on my mind for over a decade. And I think I've just sort of been listening and watching and learning, and I finally feel like, okay, I think I have woven together some ideas and some of my understanding, and I'm ready to share some of my thoughts. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you today some of the things that I have come to understand about aggression and bullying in hopes that you can have some clarity also. I'm going to be exploring this topic of aggression and bullying from the perspective as a parent and as an educator. And I'm going to look at sort of like it's a very broad overview, first of all, and the most typical expressions of aggression. There can be some really violent expressions of aggression, and I'm not going to look too deeply into that. I just feel like it's outside of my skill set. And that being said, these are my thoughts. And if you or someone you know is experiencing bullying, please reach out to trusted resources to get support. It's really important to do that. Here's a quick fact for you. Every 7 minutes, a youth who is in grades 9 to 12 is bullied in the US. That's pretty frequent. 85% of those bullying experiences or circumstances, 85% have no intervention. That means that they go unnoticed by or unintervened by a bystander or an adult in the location where the bullying is happening. In addition to that, if we were to expand that out to kids who are kindergarten to grade 12, 1 in 7 kids in their school experience will either be bullied or be a victim. Imagine if we expanded that out to include bystanders, because keep in mind, if bullying is happening in an environment, even the kids who are not directly involved as bully or bully victim, they're still experiencing this aggression and violence. So, it's a big problem. And I'm talking about kids right now, and we expanded that to include 1 in 7 kids. But if we expand it further and think about, bullying can also happen to adults. And bullying in the workplace is a topic that I've certainly been curious about in my organizational behavior interests and reading. So this idea about bullying and aggression, it's a really big topic to get some understanding around. I thought that I might start by giving a quick definition of what is bullying, and I used good old Wikipedia to help me come up with that definition. So bullying is essentially a use of force, coercion, hurtful teasing, or a threat of abuse, and it aggressively dominates or intimidates the person on the receiving end. So there is an imbalance of power. That's actually a prerequisite for bullying. Bullying doesn't usually happen between equals. So there's an imbalance of power, and quite often the experience of bullying is repetitive or habitual. So in that Wikipedia definition, I'm not sure if you caught it, but they talked about aggressive dominance. And so I think that is actually really helpful to understand aggression a little bit more in developing our understanding of bullying and how it happens. So if you were to look up, what is aggression, there's three main theories that tend to pop up. The first one is instinct theory. So it's this idea that the aggressive needs or the aggression needs aren't wrong. They're part of us. And they're part of our individual survival mechanisms. The interesting thing is there is a but. But humans have also developed to be part of a group. We've evolved to be a very social mammal, and we have group needs, and we have inclusion needs, and those needs to be part of a group are quite strong. And the skills involved in those group needs, trying to figure out how to get along and be part of a group, they tend to use more of a collaborative skill set. So it's a slightly different part of the brain that you're using for those needs that are related to inclusion and getting along in a larger group. The second theory that comes up when you're looking up aggression is social learning theory. And if you were to Google this one, Albert Bandera is the person who first came up with this theory. And I find this theory comes up a lot if you're reading about bullying and aggression. It's that idea that kids who are on the receiving end of bullying themselves or have observed or been bystanders in situations of aggression and bullying, they're more likely to use those same strategies themselves to meet their needs. So they can observe these instances of power over and bullying and aggression. They can observe them at home, either parent on parent, parent on child, older sibling on younger sibling. So the home environment is a really common place for kids to pick up on this style of discovering how to use aggression to meet your needs. Sorry, that was a bit of a slow moment for my brain there. So as they observe at home, they can also observe amongst folks in their community, maybe in sporting or recreational activities, their school environment, and also our broader culture. If you think about some of the things that your kids are maybe watching, either on Netflix or maybe on social media, they might be trying to make sense of what they are seeing in the world, and maybe they're picking up on some expressions of aggression and power over, and even though it's not coming from you, it still might be under that category of social learning theory. So they're picking up on, this is one strategy that could be used to meet my needs. The third theory that comes up is this idea that aggression is a form of frustration. So you just kind of flip your lid, and when you're feeling really frustrated, you could switch over into aggression quickly because of this feeling of frustration. So I think the part that's really interesting for me is that aggression it serves a purpose, actually. Like, it's not necessarily this all bad thing. It can keep us safe. It can help us meet our needs. However, I think it's something that we want folks to be using sparingly, because it's a power over approach, so it tends to not really use pro-social strategies. So it's not great for the bigger, larger group if we are encouraging aggression. And if you're into nonviolence and understanding nonviolence, anytime you're using power over, that is a form of violence. So if you want a more nonviolent society, you want to lean into those skills of collaboration, boundaries, and consent. I think it's helpful to explore a little bit about our brain in order to understand how aggression is expressed. So aggression is really sort of centered in the amygdala part of our brain. It's part of the limbic system. And the amygdala is really concerned about assessing threats. And these don't have to be immediate high-stake threats. They could be low-grade threats that just kind of keep you slightly on your toes. The amygdala is also related to regulation and aggression, as I said. So that fight or flight feeling, or flipping your lid, those sorts of responses are quite often the amygdala trying to protect the individual. So I think one of the more interesting things for me in understanding the amygdala is that it's also related to our memories. So we develop some of our memories so that we can protect ourselves. And we develop habitual responses so that we can protect ourselves, so that we can react quickly in a situation so that we don't get hurt. So while meeting these needs, the amygdala is really, protecting the individual. That's helpful, and we do need that from time to time. Overall, human beings are engaging as a group a lot of the time, and valuing not just individual needs, but having compassion for everyone's needs actually helps everyone in the group thrive and flourish instead of just one individual. So while it's a really helpful part of our brain, we don't want to be constantly acting from this part of our brain. Under extreme stress, the other parts of our brain, like the frontal lobes, they will essentially sort of shut down, and we go into these habitual responses. So it is great to have these automated pathways in us to protect us, but somehow we also have to develop some capacity to engage pro-socially as a group. As I mentioned when I was talking about some of the main theories related to aggression, families have a really powerful direct and indirect role in the development of aggression and expressions of violence. So first of all, there are some genetic risks, and those ones are sort of hard to avoid, but there is some possibility to counteract them. Environmental stress has a big role to play. Harsh parenting can encourage or put kids more at risk of using power over strategies themselves. Remember that Bandera theory, social learning theory. And also witnessing family violence. So if kids, again, that's Bandera's social learning theory, if kids are observing violence in their homes, it doesn't even have to be them on the receiving end of the violence. If they're just observing it, they're going to be more likely to, that strategy sort of gets hardwired into their brains, and they're going to be more likely to use similar strategies themselves when they feel that same sort of emotional trigger
in them. The interesting thing for me, anyway, as a parenting coach, is that we can counteract many of those risks within families through our parenting. So having empathic, warm communication styles with our children, offering them structure and adaptive processes related to coping with challenge and stress, helping kids with that piece can actually sort of help their brain not go into that reactive amygdala part of their brain so quickly, so often. They can start to use those frontal lobe part of their brain a little bit more often and access more strategies to meet their needs.
So our family, whether it's direct or indirect, has a really big influence over a risk for adopting aggressive or more violent tendencies and bullying. I think the other big piece is understanding how the environment can play a role. So even if your kid, even if you're a really lovely parent, you still may end up with a kid who is expressing aggression more often. And it might be interesting to look at some of those environmental factors and see if you can get some understanding there. So the environmental influences of aggression that trigger a need for protection tend to show up more often in fast-paced, high-pressure environments where it feels like it's like scarce resources, that need for protection. There's not enough for everybody. We're all trying to get the same thing. If I don't get this resource, I will suffer. You know, those kind of fast-paced, high-pressure environments. Some kids like the adrenaline rush of that. Some kids don't. But either way, those kind of environments tend to create or tap into those aggressive tendencies more often. Also, environments that don't encourage helping others or having empathy for others. So that might include environments where people are more likely to be shamed, where there is this sense of right and wrong and reward and punishment, where there's this feeling of competition over collaboration. So, you know, if there, I'm giggling in my head as I'm thinking of some of my own experiences where I might have really preferred to have a collaborative approach, but I didn't have a lot of power, and you kind of get swooped into this feeling of competition, whether you want to be doing that or not. Also, an environment that is insensitive to the expression of feelings, or an environment that doesn't allow an expression of feelings, and an environment that doesn't value all of the needs that are present in that space. So a culture that really sort of promotes or celebrates power over bullying, violence, that's what these elements are, right? Like these elements of competition, valuing one set of needs ahead of another, this idea of scarce resources, they all contribute to an environment where our limbic system is more active. We're more likely to use aggression as a strategy to meet our needs because of the environment and the way it's set up. So understanding that a little bit more, I mean, as a parent and as a teacher or a former conventional public school teacher, I think, you know, there are so many environments where our kids find themselves in these high pressure, heightened sense of competition environments. And so then it's not a surprise, or it shouldn't be a surprise, that we see more expressions of aggression coming out in our kids in these environments, because that's just sort of the way it's set up. It's set up in a way to elicit those sorts of responses more often. Let's take a moment now and explore a little bit about what we know about kids who tend to engage in bullying behavior. They are responding in ways that are more aggressive. But bullying is also, remember, it's not just that power differential, it's also the habitual behavior. So they're using strategies, power over strategies, regularly to try to meet their needs. So who is more likely to engage in this kind of behavior? Well, we have some information about this, which is really helpful because it can help us understand how to shift this a little bit. So kids who have internal emotional pain and they don't have any healthy strategies to, dipping into my NVC, to meet those unmet needs inside them. So they don't have strategies, they don't have outlets to explore this and to work through it in healthy ways. They are more likely to be at risk for engaging in bullying and aggressive behavior. Interestingly, and maybe not that interestingly because of what we know about aggression, kids who feel powerless and have a need to feel powerful are more likely to look for opportunities where they have power over someone else and take it. Take it in ways that are non-consensual, boundary violating, violent and aggressive ways. Some kids who have challenges with impulsivity, they might be more likely to find themselves switching over into aggressive behavior. And because of these habitual responses and that memory piece of our amygdala, they might be engaging in behavior that looks like habitual responses. And maybe it is habitual repetitive behavior, but that impulsivity piece is part of their puzzle and understanding why they're engaging in bullying and aggression. Now, with younger children, this kind of goes along with the impulsivity. In younger children, we also see that kids who have delays in oral communication, they are more likely to respond aggressively because they don't have necessarily other ways to express themselves or meet their needs. So again, it's really helpful to understand who's more likely to engage in bullying and aggressive and violent behaviors, because once you start to understand where they're coming from, then as a parent, an educator, someone who's in a natural power over position like that, we can use our capacity to help them regulate and develop skills so that they're less likely to use behaviors that aren't serving them in the long run and aren't serving the group. In tandem with understanding who is at more risk of being a bully and using aggressive and violent behavior, it's also really helpful to understand who is at more risk for being on the receiving end of bullying. And this one I think is quite interesting to me because, well, first of all, remember when I was giving the definition of bullying, the prerequisite was a power differential. Someone had to have more power over someone else. And so a perceived weakness or vulnerability is a key factor in who is going to be bullied. So this really depends on the group that your kids find themselves in. It could be physical differences. It could also be emotional differences. And I think that's part of the challenge because it's just differences from the norm. So the victimization isn't stable. It changes across time and across social situations and social context. So for example, a kid who easily expresses or is very emotional and expresses their sadness or their anger very easily, they might actually be more at risk with a bully who's really craving attention. That kid's more likely going to give them that fix of attention that they need. It's not positive attention, but it's attention. And understanding that victimization is context dependent. So you really have to look at the group and what's normal within the group to understand who's at more risk for being bullied and victimized. So there's that. And then other kids who are more at risk for being on the receiving end of bullying are kids who are perceived as being like more submissive or passive. So for me, it's such a great reminder, like understanding this, as parents, sometimes we think, my kid seems so easygoing, or it's so easy, I just tell my kid what to do and they do it, and what not to do and they don't do that. And we think, oh, that feels so great, great job on me, I'm a wonderful parent. However, the flip side is you want to make sure that your child is still developing skills around what am I feeling, what am I needing, boundaries and consent. Because the kid who bows easily to power, who responds positively in power over situations, is actually more at risk for being on the receiving end of bullying, aggression, and violence. So all kids, regardless of how, in quotations, well-behaved they are, need to be developing skills related to what am I feeling, what am I needing, what boundaries do I need in place to feel safe, how do I express when my boundaries are crossed, how do I respond or communicate when I need to change a boundary or remove my consent, how do I check in with other kids to see about their consent? How do I respond when I hear expressions of boundaries from other kids? And there's so many skills, and they are important for all children to be developing and practicing, not just the kids who are strong-willed or louder or, I don't know. I don't even know what other judgments to put in there, but it truly is something that all of us need to be developing. And I'm saying kids, and I'm even thinking even as adults, I mean, our culture really didn't offer us a whole lot of understanding around boundaries and consent. So there's probably a good portion of adults out there who would also really benefit from doing work in this area. And incidentally, this always comes up in connected parenting. It's sort of woven throughout our course. So yeah, it's a topic I'm passionate about. So yeah, talked a little bit about kids who are passive or perceived as submissive. I would also add to that list kids who are more at risk of bullying would include kids who lack social power or are an easy target. And the interesting thing about this is sometimes the kid is an easy target or lacks social power, and they are really clear on what their boundaries and consent are. They have developed skills in that area, and maybe they, in lots of other ways, they totally fit the group definition of what the norm is, but there's just a slight differential of power. And for a kid who is looking for power, looking to get their needs met, and they only have access to aggressive strategies, that one kid who's slightly younger, that one kid who's slightly taller, that one kid who has a little bit of acne, it just has to be a slight power differential. And that sort of highlights who to go after. So we've looked at who is most likely to engage in bullying behavior, who is most likely to receive or be on the receiving end of aggressive, violent bullying behavior. Now let's talk a little bit about changing those bullying patterns. This is where my passion really comes out. And before I get into the passionate part, let's first explore a little bit about what we know doesn't work. So I think this is why this topic has been with me for years, because as a teacher, I saw that what we were doing really didn't work. And even as a parent, it's really helpful to understand what doesn't work so that we can put our efforts into things that are going to be more fruitful. So what doesn't work to curb bullying and aggression is having a zero tolerance policy. Just saying we will not tolerate bullying does not help the kid who does not have a skill set to meet their needs and is engaging in bullying behavior. It doesn't help them. You've really just kind of made them bad and contributed to that environment that actually encourages more aggression, and there's a really good chance you've pushed it underground and made it less visible and harder to offer support. What doesn't work is offering surface level skills on empathy. And this one is so heartbreaking, I think, for educators, because when you bump up against a bullying dynamic, the skill set that you're trying to help the child who's engaging in aggressive, bullying, violent behaviors, the skill set that you're trying to help them with isn't surface level. It is a lot of working through, and it takes a lot of time and energy, working through some really difficult stuff. And so these surface level school programs where you talk about an overview about being kind or being empathetic, it really doesn't have much of an impact. Really what's needed is helping these kids develop the skills that they haven't had the opportunity to develop in their home, or the environment is influencing them in this particular direction. Another thing that we know doesn't work is having a lot of tolerance for the bullying behavior, seeing the bully as a victim and showing them a lot of kindness. Sounds really nice. I can see why people would be curious about that approach. However, once again, you're not helping them develop the skill set that they otherwise haven't been able to develop on their own in their current family or in their current environment. The work that needs to be done to help kids who are more likely to engage in bullying behavior, who are more at risk for being aggressive, being violent, the work that needs to be done, it takes a significant amount of time and support to create new skills and develop new habits. And as we put so much pressure on schools and educators to do that work, and I think the more we can understand about where aggression comes from and who's at risk for it and who's at risk for being a victim of bullying, the more we can understand how all of those pieces go together, hopefully we can move towards a better understanding of what we need to do to help these kids. And it's right now what we're offering sadly just it doesn't have enough depth to it. And I feel so much compassion for fellow educators and for parents, because I understand, having run recreational programs for kids and educational programs for kids outside of public education, I understand the amount of time and effort it takes to develop those skills. And it really, really is needs to be a team effort, because it's so, first of all, it's so important, and second of all, because it really does take a lot of time, a lot of understanding. And once the adults in their natural sort of leadership role have that understanding, then it's, creating this space of support so that kids can begin to make that shift. Let's move into what I believe does work and can create this shift and this change. So I've alluded to this when I was talking a little bit about the children who are more likely to become bullies, but we really need to help kids develop skills related to consent and boundaries. We need to help them to, and that's sort of a quick overview description, but if I were to break that down even further, it's helping kids to slow down and develop their own sense of self-awareness first. So what am I feeling? What am I needing? What are my boundaries? And then as kids get better at the parts that are related to themselves, then they're able to apply those same skills towards others, wondering, what is that person feeling? What is that person needing? And that's how we start to build those compassion skills, starting with ourselves, moving outwards. I'm also just thinking like that internal emotional pain that can become violent when it's released. Part of this developing the skills is actually doing the work when it's messy, when it's painful. So I'm not saying when a kid is like totally freaking out, oh, what are you feeling? You might have to wait for the moment after that when they are in a space of calm to explore those feelings a little bit more delicately and gently and with compassion. And again, remember that environment piece is really important. Kids aren't in trouble for feeling what they're feeling, nor are they actually in trouble for responding in the way that they do. Getting in trouble with a punishment contributes to that feeling of shame. So we're trying to shift that, and we don't want them to continue the behavior, but we want them to be able to shift, to understand their behavior differently so that they can begin to catch themselves in the moment, catch themselves so that they could choose a different strategy to meet their needs. As adults, we can also work towards creating environments that are, trust-building environments. So no shaming, no getting in trouble. Here's an interesting one, no sugarcoating. No sugarcoating to protect someone. That does not inspire trust. And information sharing would also be something that would inspire trust. So creating a very trusting environment that works to help everyone involved access the support that they need. Promoting diversity. So having a variety of perspectives, and not just perspectives, but different skill levels. I think those are two that are often forgotten, and I'm kind of thinking right now about some of the reading that I've done about workplace bullying and how sometimes decisions are made it seems like in a vacuum, or they sort of are made higher up in a hierarchy. Actually, if we want to have more creativity and more needs met and a broader understanding of a problem, we need to have greater diversity. So valuing all of the needs that are being expressed and all of the perspectives is really important. To go along with that, encouraging open-mindedness and curiosity. So again, this is so that we can access more empathy for others and access more strategies to meet a wider variety of needs. Environments that are high in warmth and care and empathy are less likely to tap into that amygdala and limbic system of approaching or responding to a problem. And I think this is especially true having experiences in organizations and studying organizations. It's especially true for the folks who are leaders. So whether that's a leader of your family, a leader of a group of kids in a recreational program or in a classroom. As a leader, the more often you can respond with warmth and empathy, the less likely your the people who are under you, or the people who have less power than you, the more likely they are to be able to tap into other areas of their brain and respond to problems in ways that are meeting everyone's needs and not just theirs. So this is especially true for leaders, responding with warmth and empathy, and it's especially true in times of adversity. So when things are really tricky and the pressure is high, if a leader can kind of hold the umbrella over their charges so that in those moments of adversity, they're still finding ways to tap into warmth. They're still finding ways to tap into empathy. The people who are receiving that are more likely to respond with empathy and compassion themselves. When a leader responds to a problem with forms of violence, aggression, or bullying, it's more likely that all of the people that are, I hate this terminology, the people that are beneath them are more likely to respond in those ways too. So, yeah, social status signals and expression of power, they really kill collaboration. So finding ways to value what everyone is bringing to the table and understanding different perspectives, that's really how we begin to have that shift. So this is the work that I do as a parent coach in connected parenting. This is the work that we do to make that shift, to help kids develop those skills. And before kids develop those skills, we usually need to develop them ourselves first. And I would also just like to add that I have a program that is specifically for teachers. I haven't offered it publicly, but for teachers who want to learn these skills and apply them in the classroom, it's the same set of skills that you would use as a parent. It's actually the same set of skills that you would use in an organization also. Going back to that self-awareness, understanding how needs and feelings are interrelated, boundaries and consent, and how to express and change your mind and check for consent. All of these pieces are so important. And I think that the more we understand about aggression and bullying, and not in ways that punish the person who is the bully, but in ways that actually create real change and stop the behavior. Gosh, isn't that what we're all after? Like real change. All right, I think I'm rambling now, so it's definitely time to stop. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please give me a like, share me with a friend. If you know someone who might enjoy this video, I would love it if you would share it with them so that they could see if they connect to my work and my material also. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next week with another video. Bye.